Hey guys, it's going Duty. I'm back with another video, and in today's video, I would call this part one of a two-parter I'm going to be doing on Jack the Ripper. In today's video, we're going to go through the autopsy reports of the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, and then in a follow-up video, I'm going to be going through theories as to who was Jack the Ripper. Before we get into that though, I do just want to give a shout out to my patron of the day, and my patron of the day is Samantha Quinn. So Samantha, thank you so much for being a patron. I really appreciate you. I appreciate all my patrons. If you would like to become a patron yourself, then please head over to the Patreon. It is linked down below. You can become a patron for as little as £1 a month. Right, okay, let's talk Jack the Ripper. I feel like I'm saying the obvious here when I say Jack the Ripper was never caught. That's why I'm going to have a follow-up video having theories as to who was Jack the Ripper. And Jack the Ripper killed 5 women thought to be prostitutes. However, that is now sort of refuted. We'll get to that in just a moment. In the district of Whitechapel in the London East End between August and November of 1888, 5 women were brutally murdered. This is, I would go as far as to say, the most famous unsolved true crime case, certainly in England, possibly the world. What do you think? Do you think that the Jack the Ripper case is the most famous unsolved case of all time in the world, or just in this country? The 5 victims of Jack the Ripper were Mary Ann Nichols, whose body was found on August 31st, Annie Chapman, who was found on September the 8th, Elizabeth Stride, who was found on September the 30th, Catherine Eddowes, who was also found on September the 30th, and Mary Jane Kelly, who was found on November the 9th. Now, it's been long believed that all of these women were prostitutes, and all but one was out soliciting on the night of their murder. This was until recently, when British social historian Hayley Rubenhold released a book in 2019 titled The 5: The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper. Now, in this book, it is argued that Nichols, Chapman and Eddowes were not prostitutes, that Stride would only solicit when she absolutely had to, and that the only verifiable prostitute out of the 5 was Kelly. The kind of conclusion of the book is that these women were incredibly misrepresented, misinterpreted, and the thought that Jack the Ripper was a murderer of prostitutes was driven by misogyny and the class-based prejudices that were prevalent in the Victorian era. So it's up for debate as to how many of these women were prostitutes, but regardless of whether they were prostitutes or not, they should never have been murdered. But they were, tragically, and the killer has never been found. Today, I'm going to read to you the post-mortem reports, and I have to warn you, they are very hard to hear. Mary Ann Nichols, body in situ. Mary was lying lengthwise with her head turned towards the east. Her left hand touched the gate. Her bonnet was lying near her right hand. Her skirts were rumpled just above her knees. Her throat was severely cut. Her eyes were wide open and glassy. Blood had oozed from her throat wounds. Her arms felt warm from the elbows up. Her hands were open. The gateway was 9 inches to 10 inches in height and led to some stables. They were closed. The post-mortem reports: her throat was cut from left to right, with 2 distinct cuts being on the left side and with the windpipe, gullet and spinal cord being cut through. A bruise, possibly from a thumb, on the lower right jaw, with another on the left cheek. The abdomen had been cut open from centre of the bottom ribs along the right side. Just under the pelvis, left of the stomach, was another wound, jagged. The omentum stomach coating was cut in several places. 2 small stabs from the privy parts. The knife used seemed to have been strong-bladed, possibly a left-handed killer. Death almost instantaneous. 5 teeth missing, slight laceration on the tongue, bruise on the lower part of the right jaw, possibly from a punch or thumb pressure. Circular bruise on the left side of the face, possibly also from finger pressure. Left side of the neck, 1 inch below the jaw, 4 inches incision starting immediately below the left ear. Second throat incision starting 1 inch below and 1 inch in front of the first, running 8 inches in a circular direction around the throat and stopping 3 inches below the right ear, completely severing all tissues down to the spine, including the large vessels of the neck on both sides. No blood found on breast, of clothes, or of body. On the lower part of abdomen, 2 to 3 inches from left side ran a very deep jagged wound, cutting the tissues through. Several incisions ran across the abdomen. 3 or 4 similar cuts ran down the right side of the abdomen. So what we kind of gauge just from that post-mortem alone is that these murders, and to be honest they only get worse, these women were butchered in the most horrific manner. Annie Chapman, body in situ. Annie was lying on her back. Her legs were bent at the knees. Her feet were flat on the ground. Her dress was pushed above her knees. Her left arm lay across her left breast. Her right arm at her side. The small intestines still attached by a cord, and part of the abdomen lay above her right shoulder. 2 flaps of skin from the lower abdomen lay in a large quantity of blood above the left shoulder. Her throat was deeply cut in a jagged manner. A neckerchief was around her neck. Her face was swollen and turned to her right side. The tongue was very swollen, protruding from the front teeth, but not the lips. The limbs were not very stiff, but rigor mortis was commencing. Throat was deeply severed by a jagged incision which reached right around the neck. The body was cold, but heat remained in the body under the intestines. The post-mortem of Annie Chapman. Bruise over the right temple. 2 man's thumb-sized bruises on top 4 part of the chest. 3 scratches below the lower left jaw. 1 to 1.5 to 2 inches below the left earlobe, going in the opposite direction of throat wounds. Bruise on the right cheek, bruise corresponding with the scratches, abrasion on the head of proximal phalanx of ring finger, marks of rings on same finger, upper eyelid bruise, limbs very stiff, but left side more stiff than the right side. Bruise on middle part of bone of right hand, scar on left of frontal bone, fingers of left hand partly closed. Little food in the stomach, no sign of fluid, no sign of alcohol consumption. Lungs diseased, brain membranes diseased, signs of deprivation, front teeth perfect on top and bottom as far as the first molar. The shortest throat incision ran from the front of the throat and terminated on the right side between the lower jaw and the breastbone. The longest throat incision completely encircled the throat, running along the line of the jaw. The incisions ran from the victim's left to right, 2 clean and distinct cuts on the left side of the spine which were parallel to each other and were ½ inch apart. Missing were the womb, upper part of the vagina, greater part of the bladder, and part of the belly wall that included the navel. Elizabeth Stride. Body in situ. The body was all warm except for the hands, which were quite cold. The legs were quite warm, the neck and chest were quite warm, and the face was slightly warm. Blood had stopped flowing from the throat wound. Further up the yard, a stream of blood had clotted, having run down the gutter into the drain in the opposite direction of the feet. Here was very little blood left by the neck. There was about 1 pound of clotted blood close by the body. She was lying on her left side obliquely across the passage, her face looking towards the right wall, and appeared quite placid. Her head was resting beyond the carriage wheel rut, the neck lying over the rut. The mouth was slightly open. Her legs were drawn up, her feet close against the wall on the right side of the passage. Her feet were 3 yards from the gateway towards the street. Left arm extended from elbow, the left hand lying on the ground, was partially closed and contained a small packet of cashews. The right arm was lying over the body. The right hand was open and on the chest, and was smeared with blood on the back of the hand and on the wrist. An abrasion of the skin about 1 inch and a quarter diameter, apparently slightly stained with blood, was under the right clavicle. The throat was deeply gashed. In the neck was a long incision which exactly corresponded with the lower border of her scarf. The incision commenced on the left side, 2.5 inches below the angle of the jaw and almost in a direct line with it, nearly severing the vessels on that side, cutting the windpipe completely in 2 and terminating on the opposite side, 1.5 inches below the angle of the right jaw, but without severing the vessel on that side. Catherine Eddowes. She lay on her back, head turned towards her left shoulder, arms at her side as if fallen there, both palms up with fingers slightly bent. Clothes were pushed above her abdomen. Thighs were naked, left leg straight out, right leg bent at the knee knee and thigh. Abdomen exposed, face disfigured. Throat was cut. Intestines were drawn out and placed over the right shoulder and was smeared over with some feculent matter. Another section of intestines were placed between the left arm and the body. Near the left side of the neck, shoulder and upper part of the arm, there was clotted blood on pavement which sloped. Accounting for the blood flow under the right shoulder, fluid blood under the neck and right shoulder, the body was quite warm. Rigor mortis had not yet started. No blood on the skin of the abdomen, no secretion on the thighs, no spurting of blood, no marks of blood below the body's middle. The post-mortem. Rigor mortis well marked. Green discoloration over the abdomen. Body not quite cold. No traces of recent connection. Recent bruises size of a sixpence on the left hand between thumb and first finger. Left eyelid cut. Deep cut on the bridge of the nose. Cut on the right cheek. Tip of the nose detached. 2 abrasions on the left cheek under the left ear. Throat cut nearly ear to ear, dividing all tissue down to the bone. Frontal abdominal walls cut open from the pubic area to the breastbone. Liver was stabbed. Left of the groin a stab wound. Cuts made between the thighs and labium on both sides. Stomach contained very little food or fluid. Intestines had been detached. Right kidney bloodless and pale. Gallbladder had bile. Pancreas was cut. Left kidney removed. Uterus lining was cut. Womb was cut through, leaving 3 to 4 inches of a stump. Womb was removed. Bladder was healthy. And finally, Mary Jane Kelly. The thighs were stripped, the abdomen was removed. Abdominal cavity was empty. The breasts were cut off. Arms were mutilated. Facial features were removed. The neck was severed down to the spine. Left femur split from the hip downward, exposing the marrow cavity. The uterus, kidneys and 1 breast were placed under the head. The other breast was by the right foot. The liver was placed between the feet. Intestines lay by the right side of the body. Flesh removed from the abdomen and thighs were placed on the table. The heart was absent from the room. Bed clothing and the right corner of the bed was saturated with blood. About 2 square feet of blood was below the bed. The wall by the right bedstead had several splashings of blood. The face was cut in all directions, numerous cuts across all features. The neck was cut down to the vertebrae. The cuts showed distinct ecchymosis. The breasts were removed by quasi-circular incisions. Associated muscles attached to the breasts. Thorax visible through the cuts. Abdomen and costal arch to pubes removed. Front right thigh skin down to the bone. Left thigh stripped of skin and muscle as far as the knee. The left calf had a long incision running from the knee to 5 inches above the ankle. Both arms and forearms had extensive jagged wounds. The right thumb had a 1-inch superficial cut. Extravasation of the blood in the skin and several abrasions on the back of the hand. Lower part of the right lung was broken and torn away. Left lung intact. Pericardium was open and the heart absent. Partially digested food found in the abdominal cavity and in the stomach remains. Mary Jane Kelly was... I can't even describe. I mean, I'm looking at the image. An image that I cannot put on YouTube. An image that you can Google if you want to. I highly recommend that you don't, in all honesty. It is horrific. Horrific. I don't even know. It's beyond words, you know, what he did to these women and what happened to Mary Jane Kelly, his last victim, or the last victim that we know, you know, that is confirmed to be with the same killer, if that makes sense. There are theories that there are more murders given to Jack the Ripper in the consequential years, but these ones are kind of like nailed on, if you like, or thought to be nailed on to be Jack the Ripper, but he was never found. And there are many theories that I'll go into in another video. Hit that like button if you'd like to see that video. But Mary Jane Kelly, Catherine Eddowes, Elizabeth Stride, Annie Chapman and Mary Ann Nichols. Horrific what happened to these women. Absolutely horrific. You know, let's just hope that they rest in peace, because no one deserves what happened to these women, least of all them. And it's incredibly sad. That is the crimes of Jack the Ripper. The autopsy reports of the victims. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll speak to you very soon. Sweet one. Peace.